Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Al Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's programme, we're focused on the escalating tensions between nuclear-armed neighbours India and Pakistan and asking, could the two countries be on track for all-out war? Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin with the latest on the tensions that are soaring between nuclear-armed neighbours India and Pakistan. Well, India has launched missile strikes under what it's called Operation Sindoor, hitting sites in Pakistan and Pakistani-administered Kashmir, which India claims are terror camps. Well, at least 26 people, including a child, were killed, according to local officials. And Pakistan calls this an act of war. Well, Pakistan has responded with shelling that killed at least 10 people in India-administered Kashmir and claims it hit Indian military posts and downed warplanes. Well, this escalation follows a deadly attack in Kashmir, which killed 26 Indian tourists. India blames Pakistan. That's a charge that Islamabad denies. Well, family members of the victims killed in the Pahalgam terror attack have reacted to India's strikes on Pakistan, praising Operation Sindoor as an act of justice and revenge.
I am happy about the Indian airstrikes at the terror centers in Pakistan, which took place at 2 a.m. I am proud that the Indian Army and Prime Minister Narendra Modi stood by their promises and attacked Pakistan. The departed souls of my family members can now rest in peace.
We trusted the Indian Army. They retaliated accordingly and kept our faith. I am really thankful.
Well, the Indian Air Force, meanwhile, says it used precision weapons and targeted warheads to strike the alleged terror camps, aiming to avoid any collateral damage.
Technology weapons with careful selection of warheads was ensured so that there will be no collateral damage. The point of impact in each of the target was a specific building or a group of buildings. All the targets were neutralized with clinical efficiency, and the results reiterate the professionalism of the Indian Armed Forces in the planning and execution of their operations.
Well, let's get more analysis. We can speak now to Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, the former Foreign Secretary of India and former Indian Ambassador to Turkey, Egypt, France and Russia. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. We were just hearing earlier on that the Indian Air Force says it's conducted precision strikes with no collateral damage. But there was a strike that hit a mosque, amongst other things, in the town of Muzaffarabad. 21 civilians killed there, amongst them 4 children. I mean, that doesn't sound like a focused or measured response.
Well, these masjids are there in terror camps, as you know. After all, that's part of the way the Muslims live. Wherever there is a congregation of Muslims, whether they're terrorists or not terrorists, the masjids are there. And I don't know if they hid in the masjids or whatever, but I won't take what Pakistanis say at its face value. But it's always possible. I don't deny that collateral damage does take place, and it's possible that some civilians may have been killed. But that was neither the intent nor the purpose of the strikes. In fact, India could have chosen other targets, military targets, but it refrained from doing so and only targeted known sites of jihadi organizations in Pakistan, which have been responsible for conducting terror strikes in India. Now, this is not only connected to the Pahalgam strike, but other strikes that have taken place in the past, and our spokespeople have actually said what the connection between the various sites that were targeted and the terror attacks on Indian soil are. So it was a very pinpointed operation, and the intention was essentially to combat terrorism and send a very powerful message to Pakistan that we have tolerated terrorism from its soil. And there have been absolutely horrific incidents, including the Mumbai terror attack, when we did nothing. And time has come that this latitude that Pakistan gives itself cannot continue. And things have to be brought to a head in terms of India taking strong measures against terror groups operating on Pakistani soil and in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and we've done it.
Ambassador, I want to ask you a bit more about these so-called terrorist camps that India's been targeting in Pakistan. I mean, what sort of intelligence is there, and what sort of proof is there that these camps are indeed operated and run by militants? Because Pakistan would argue that they're constantly being accused of not cracking down on militant groups, but they say this is a false flag. How do you answer that?
I mean, do you really buy that? But does anybody buy that? I mean, look, I mean, one can always, Pakistani can say what they want. After all, Osama bin Laden was sheltered in Pakistan without the Pakistanis knowing him. I mean, do you buy that? I mean, there's a Pakistani hand even in the World Trade Center bombing. In fact, when we presented evidence after the Mumbai terror attacks took place in 2008, they dismissed it as literature. When it came to the Pathankot terror attack, initially the Pakistanis were willing to participate in the investigation, and we took the extremely unusual step of inviting a Pakistani delegation, which was not only military, but had people from their intelligence agencies come and visit our airbase in Pathankot. And at the end of the day, they said, there's no evidence. And there have been repeated instances. In fact, I would like to ask the Pakistanis, can they name one instance where they have extended cooperation to us in this area? In fact, when I was in office and subsequently, I was making this point that if the Pakistanis were actually to cooperate with us and tell us that there are these terrorists who are not under our control, but are trying to move into India's Jammu and Kashmir, and therefore be alert, these are the routes they are taking, fine. Then this is real cooperation on the ground. But this has never happened, never happened. But all Pakistan does is that we are ourselves victim of terrorism. We don't support terrorism. These are locals who are fighting for their freedom and whatever, and we have no hand in it. Total denial and total refusal to cooperate with us. So what do? This can't carry on.
Sure.
Now, this time Kashmir was getting stabilized. Elections had taken place. And remarkably, those parties which had governed Kashmir earlier won the election. The public participation in elections was very, very considerable. And in fact, I was in Srinagar in January in some connection, and I saw the great difference that had taken place over the years, where there are restaurants, there are even beauty parlors, there are cinemas. The life is very normal. This year, 23 million Indian tourists visited Jammu and Kashmir. The country had begun to prosper. They were getting stakes in the rising prosperity in the country, in the region, in the state. And now the Pakistanis have tried to set this back. And one more point I'd like to make. The speech made by the Pakistani Chief of Army Staff a few days ago, where out of the blue he talked about the two-nation theory and went to the point of saying that Hindus and Muslims have nothing in common. Stress the divide between Hindus and Muslims, giving it a religious color, and then lauded the heroism of the people of Jammu and Kashmir in their struggle for freedom. One could interpret that as almost an open call to do something on the ground, and this has happened.
One of the things we hear quite often from officials in Pakistan is they say that the Indian government mistreats Kashmiri Muslim people and the Muslims more broadly across India, very sizable minority that they are, face discrimination in many different ways and many different aspects of their life. How do you respond to that?
Well, the most important, the most salient response is that more and more Muslims want to enter India illegally. Even the Rohingya have come into India. Lots of Bangladeshi Muslims have come to India in our border districts, which has changed the demographics of our country. These Muslims who are persecuted, I'm talking about Muslims in our region, they can go to any Muslim country. After all, there are 57 of them, but they prefer to come to India. But yes, I would admit that because of the legacy of the partition and the wounds of the partition, and the fact that Pakistan continues to play the religious card against India, tries to create communal divisions in India, because secular India and an Islamic Pakistan conceptually are in confrontation. And Pakistan's existence depends on deepening this confrontation and the differences between the two in terms of religion. So that puts our society under stress. And when you have 1.4 billion people altogether and 200 and some billion Muslims, some incidents will occur here and there. And this gives fodder to propagandists to say that Muslims are persecuted. But then there are law and order problems amongst other communities in India. Can you imagine for 1.4 billion people living in one geographical space, and that there should be no problem?
Sure.
Look at Europe.
Yeah,
Look at Europe, where there's a huge problem on the ground with Muslim immigrants from various countries, and there have been terrible terror attacks. But this has become a fact of life in Europe, of living together, of pressures, of some people disgruntled, whether they are refugees or whether they're local people, and clashes occur and murders take place. People are mowed down with vehicles and things like that. This is happening.
Yeah, but given the history, and as we've been saying, it does go back to partition, goes back even before partition. It's part of the reason why partition happened, rightly or wrongly. Do you think that the situation we're in, perhaps with these border tensions between India and Pakistan right now, run the risk of further fueling some of those, some of that unrest we were talking about within India and these sectarian tensions? Do you think we might see a worsening of that sectarian tension?
On the contrary. On the contrary. Of course, this does not mean that there are no pockets of Muslims in India who sort of look at the social situation in India differently from the majority of the Muslims, just as there are other elements of our society who have their own demands and their own complaints and look at the overall social picture critically. So yes, a small minority may feel that way, but the large majority, they want to get on with their lives, live peacefully, benefit from India's rise, India's progress, and the welfare schemes that the government of India has instituted, which actually benefit all sections of the society. When free rations are given to 800 million people, nobody asks them, what your religion is or whatever, or free schemes or other schemes with regard to gas cylinders and what have you, insurance-free healthcare, this and that. All these are religion-agnostic schemes in India from which the Muslims are benefiting. In this particular case, personally, I'm convinced, and I'm not saying this because I'm an Indian and I've been an official in the government of India. I don't think that the Muslims in India are going to side with Pakistan on this or feel insecure because this is taking place. Because, in fact, they would be very unhappy that Pakistan continues to stoke these tensions and create difficulties in Indian society. And they would rather that they did not do so. And one final point I want to make. The great success of Indian diplomacy, which we are very conscious of, is the excellent ties we had with the UAE and with Saudi Arabia, and of course, traditionally with Oman and other countries, with the Muslim world, the conservative Muslim world.
Okay.
Because I think they understand what is happening on the ground in India and are not moved by propaganda.
We're talking here, aren't we, about two nuclear-armed nations. How dangerous do you think the risk is of a miscalculation or a serious escalation?
Well, first of all, when we attack terror camps and we make it known that we have not targeted any military infrastructure of Pakistan or any military target of Pakistan, we are making it very clear that we are not looking for escalation. We are only looking at addressing the issue of terrorism and sending a strong warning signal to Pakistan that this cannot continue. And if it continues, of course, we'll see what happens. But if Pakistan in turn starts attacking our military infrastructure, because there are no terrorist camps in India where they can say, look, it's tit for tat. So if they start attacking our military infrastructure, then we are bound to react. So at some stage, things can get escalated. But it's Pakistan, which is constantly talking about the fact that it's a nuclear power, and India and Pakistan are nuclear powers. And In fact, the defense minister went to the absurd extent of saying that if Pakistan's existence is threatened, the whole world will not survive. As if, China, Russia, Europe, or United States will become victims of Pakistani retaliation. This kind of loose talk is intended to instill fear in the international community and put pressure on India. Because the fact is, yes, India and Pakistan are nuclear weapon states, but we are 1.4 billion people. We need to protect our people. We're not going to foolishly enter into a situation where there is even the remote possibility of use of nuclear weapons. I mean, look at what's happening in Europe and Russia in Ukraine. Russia is, after the United States, the most formidable nuclear power. NATO countries are nuclear power. The United States is the foremost nuclear power. There's far greater danger of nuclear weapons being used there than in the case of India and Pakistan, because our goals are very limited. It's only to fight terrorism, not to destroy Pakistan as a state.
When you look at the internal context in Pakistan, obviously you've got the highly popular politician, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, in prison. Do you think the fact that, there has been some unrest and some turmoil in domestic politics in Pakistan is a contributing factor to the situation we're in today?
There is an interpretation like that, which says that General Asim Malik, who's got this confrontation with Imran Khan, which has gone to the extent of imprisoning him and preventing him from fighting the elections, that General Malik, the Chief of Army Staff, is steadily losing popularity, not only because of the fact that Imran Khan has a lot of street support, but also because the Balochistan Liberation Front has become very active. The TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, has become very active from Afghanistan soil. And surprisingly, there is now military confrontation of sorts between the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And this is so ironic, because Pakistan thought that it had got strategic depth by aiding the Taliban to gain power in Afghanistan, but the two sides are not quarreling with each other. And this reflects on the position of the Chief of Army Staff and the Pakistani Armed Forces, because they have suffered a lot of casualties on that side. So in order to divert attention and create a situation in India where General Malik and the Chief of Army Staff can once again drive home to the Pakistanis that there is a danger from India, and the only institution in Pakistan that can safeguard Pakistan's security interests and its existence is the armed forces. So maybe he thinks that this is a way to bounce back in public opinion. But there is speculation to that effect, yes.
Sure. Ambassador, if we were to build and craft a lasting peace between India and Pakistan, as we've been saying, there's been 8 decades of tensions, especially in the border region of Jammu and Kashmir. Do you think that peace can be constructed on current geographical demarcations, or do you think there has to be some sort of a readjustment to the geography on one side or the other of the border?
Well, if you take the extremist positions of Pakistan, that for peace they need to have a solution to the Kashmir issue, which means that they should have the Muslim part of Kashmir as part of Pakistan, which then you go back to 1947. Then I am afraid the prospects of peace would remain pretty uncertain. India rightfully, legally claims that Pakistan occupied Kashmir is a part of India. But we have no agenda of taking it by force. We are not promoting terrorism there. There's already some unhappiness on the ground, a lot of public demonstrations in Gilgit-Baltistan for a variety of reasons. So there's unrest there. We'll see what happens in the future. We hope that Pakistan can remain a united country. We would be happy with that. We don't want the breakup of Pakistan and have more than one neighbor to our west in a larger situation of uncertainty and instability. But it's for Pakistan to worry about and try and address their internal problems and remain a united country. As you know, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or in Balochistan or even in Sindh, there is great resistance to the domination of Punjab in Pakistan. But that's not our creation, nor do we wish Pakistan ill. But if the idea is that the permanent peace requires a redrawing of frontiers, then I'm afraid we won't have a permanent peace. But that's not our wish or our desire. We would like to have proper, normal, friendly relations with Pakistan, normal trade. I will tell you, if Pakistan actually were to give up its recourse to terrorism and not have this single-minded focus on somehow wresting Kashmir away from Jammu and Kashmir away from India, the two countries can not only live in peace, but they can prosper together.
And just lastly, I mean, India has, of course, suspended this crucial water-sharing pact, the Indus Water Treaty, it's called. I mean, is India actually allowed to do that by international law? And you know, Pakistan has said that doing that is, in fact, what it called an act of war. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, the Indus Water Treaty gives us certain rights on the 3 rivers that were allocated to Pakistan. But let me go back. The Indus Water Treaty was forced on India at a time when India was in a very weak economic situation and were literally dependent on the World Bank. The Americans treated Pakistan as their ally. In fact, President Ayub Khan used to say that Pakistan is the most allied ally of the United States of America. So this was foisted on us. 80% of the waters of the Indus River Basin went to Pakistan and only 20% to India. Not only that, India had to, I forget the figure, about $170 million India had to spend to help Pakistan develop alternative headworks on their side in order to continue access to the waters, or 80% waters that were given to them. But but on the 3 rivers allocated to Pakistan, we were given certain rights. If you look at the Indus Waters Treaty, the treaty itself is about 17 pages. But the annexures are 85 pages, and those annexures actually contain extremely detailed provisions with regard to India building barrages and dams for production of electricity, as well as a limited amount of agriculture. Now, Pakistan, right from the start, has put all obstacles it possibly could to prevent and delay the construction of these dams, the barrages. The Baghdihar project was delayed by 15 years. Kishan Ganga currently is also getting delayed because Pakistan will use the provisions of the treaty that they object to this, they object to that, set up a neutral observer, then have arbitration, and the whole process goes on and on and on. In 23, we asked the Pakistani government officially that we need to look at the provisions of the treaty and modify them. That's the word used. In 24, we sent a stronger note saying that the treaty needs to be reviewed. But Pakistan has not changed its approach to the Indus Waters Treaty, and therefore, this time we have suspended it, we have held it in abeyance, we've still not abrogated it. But if the United States can abrogate the ABM and the INF and can walk out of the Paris Agreement and the JCPOA, then what stops India from walking out of the Indus Waters Treaty? Because the Indus Waters Treaty was based on establishing a permanent understanding and friendship on a very vital issue like waters. But this has been accompanied on the Pakistani side, at least since the middle 1980s, by terrorism. And that's why at some stage our Prime Minister said that blood and water cannot flow together. So there's a history to this. But let me assure you also that India is not going to stop the flow of water. What we'll do is that we will build these barrages which we are entitled to in accordance with modern technology and in accordance with our legitimate needs. But there is no intention to stop the flow of water.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much for speaking to us, though. Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Now, before we cross to our guest from Pakistan, let's get a quick reminder of the Kashmir conflict. Well, Kashmir has been disputed by India and Pakistan since 1947. Both countries claim it in full, but control parts of it and have fought 2 wars over that region. Well, India, meanwhile, accuses Pakistan of supporting militants in Indian-administered Kashmir. That's a charge that Islamabad denies, insisting it only offers diplomatic and moral backing for Kashmiri self-determination. Well, residents of Muzaffarabad, which is the main city in Pakistani-administered Kashmir, recounted the overnight strikes as troops have cordoned off streets surrounding one of the targeted sites.
The strikes took place overnight. The children were very scared. We couldn't go anywhere.
We are moving to a safer place so we don't face any problems. We are homeless now. Our children are scattered. I also got injured in the shelling last night. The whole night we kept moving here and there.
Well, Pakistan's military has vowed to respond to India's cross-border strikes, calling them unprovoked.
And I want to make it clear that Pakistan only responded in self-defense. It is India which cowardly attacked Pakistan and violated our territorial integrity and sovereignty and killed innocent citizens, including children, women, and elderly. Pakistan reserves the right and will respond to this aggression at a time, place, and means of our own choice.
So how far will Pakistan go in its retaliation? Well, for more, we can cross to Karachi, and we're joined by Senator Sherry Rehman, who is the Vice President of the Pakistan People's Party and the parliamentary leader in the Senate. You also served, Senator, as the first female leader of the opposition in the Senate back in 2018. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Let's start by looking at where we are right now. Pakistan vowing to respond to India's latest strikes. How far do you think Islamabad is prepared to go with its retaliation?
So I think, thank you very much. So I think the first thing we need to look at is that Pakistan has been calling for joint protocols on working on countering terrorism, climate change, many common threats of the 21st century as well as the 20th century, and from the government to pop stars to civil society to parliamentarians. Pretty much everyone has been speaking of peace for a long time, but we've found that the Indian response has been extremely belligerent and frankly very, very toxic in its bias and otherization of Pakistan, which has been escalating recently. And yes, I understand that you're saying, what does Pakistan want to do to respond? I believe that the Indian test of Pakistan's conventional capability on the 7th of May was, that was a show of spectacular overconfidence because Pakistan's conventional capability certainly came up to the mark. There was India with over 75 jets in play. I mean, think about it in terms of responding to such an attack. 75 jets in play. What are they thinking of? This is the Weimar Republic looking to carpet bomb, Dresden or London. In response, Pakistan took down 5 jets and a few more drones and did not escalate this whole dogfight beyond what they felt was a deterrent capability, which was very clearly demonstrated. The Pakistan Air Force responded very maturely with measured, precise, and precision strikes that were restrained. India has launched an attack in the dead of night after 2 weeks of an orchestrated campaign demonizing Pakistan without any evidence as the perpetrator of a heinous terrorist attack in occupied Kashmir, which we've all condemned. So,
I wanted to go back to that, Senator. I wanted to go back to that attack. I mean, it was 2 weeks ago, and we could go all the way back to 1947, but let's stick to two weeks ago. That attack carried out in Indian-run Kashmir. New Delhi blaming Islamabad and New Delhi saying, why isn't Pakistan cracking down on militant groups inside its territory? How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm sorry, Pakistan has been cracking down on militant groups for a long time. I mean, if they have not got that memo, if they also, they should know also that Pakistan found a serving Indian official in Balochistan stoking terror and, of course, certainly financing and facilitating terrorist networks and groups. His name is Kulbhushan Yadav. He's not Italian. He's a serving Indian military officer. No such evidence has been found against Pakistan. They keep saying that your fingerprints are on this, but when the Pakistan government immediately offered a transparent, neutral, open to anyone inquiry, they just pulled back. There was a radio silence for a while, and in all of the smoke and mirrors, all they've done is run a campaign on their establishment-linked media on simply vilifying Pakistan without any evidence. And you know, they've been asked for that evidence, even by media outlets, because that is a question that springs to everyone's mind. But, you know, you can't do this. This can't become normalized. You can't start weaponizing water and you know, trying to annul treaties, water treaties that have stood the test of wars, because, you know, that Indus is the lifeline of our country. You can't start bombing innocent children and civilians and mosques in premeditated nighttime attacks. That's simply outside the protocols of all war.
Sure, we're going to talk about water in just a moment, Senator.
No, I call it an organized act of state-sponsored act of terrorism. This is exactly what it is.
But India's saying,
and Pakistan responded with maturity and restraint. You know, I think that has been something that the international community should point out to India, because you're talking about, obviously, also how Pakistan will respond. Pakistan has stated very clearly that its response is always mature and restrained. But the fact here now is that Pakistan will choose to respond at a time and place of its own choosing. I'm not really going to sit here and discuss it on national television or international television, and also point to the fact that you know, risk reduction and interrupting what is a potential dangerous escalatory spiral is not just Pakistan's responsibility, is it? You can't have one side whipping up a war frenzy and to a country that even till last week was prioritizing peace, prioritizing dialogue. And here you have this kind of, you know, frankly, absolutely absurd and atrocious response, which is highly condemnable. So,
okay, let me stop you there, because Senator, I mean, India goes further than just saying Pakistan should do more to crack down on these groups. India says that the groups concerned, these militant organizations, are trained and funded by the Pakistani military. Is there any truth in that?
So if they have proof of that training and funding with all their geo satellites and their billions invested in surveillance equipment, and if you go to the you know, if you're in outer space, which I assume you're not, but if there's a satellite in outer space, what they'll see on planet Earth is one hard, high velocity voltage border between India and Pakistan. It's the hardest border in the world. It is so well lit, so well monitored and supervised and surveilled that it's very hard for Pakistan to be, or anybody to be doing this from Pakistan. And, you know, I'm sorry, but this kind of canard that is constantly floated, you know, if you're accusing Pakistan of financing and fostering terrorism, I mean, how do you respond to that? If you say, all right, let's look at it jointly, let's look at some protocols, let's have a third party or a neutral entity look at it, or in Kashmir, where there's a you know, violent settler colonialism going on at play. They have gotten rid of UN MOGIP, which is the observer body. At every step, India has just kicked aside all offers of neutral investigation, of any transparency. They don't have a shred of evidence. They are unable to even name whom they accuse as links to Pakistan. So I think this is becoming very absurd, and we can't allow this kind of demonization to become casus belli or cause for war.
Okay, Senator, I just wanted to ask you about the group.
Normalized, surely.
Let's talk about the group in question, the group accused of carrying out the attack in India last month that killed 26 people. They're called Lashkar-e-Taiba. I don't know how well known they are within Pakistan, but would you say that perhaps India and Pakistan would agree on one thing, that this particular group is a threat to the stability of both countries? Would you go as far as to say that?
I hate to interrupt you, but that's not the name that was floated out. You can start with any name and you can create an alphabet soup of terrorist group names and entities and suggest that they exist and suggest that they bombed. This is a black hole that leads nowhere. In my view, quite on the other sense, they have painted themselves into a corner. They have no evidence to provide. If they sense or suggest that this is Lashkar-e-Taiba, they gave another name, which I've frankly never heard of, and I'm not sitting under a rock. So they need to have provided some evidence, some shred of linkage to Pakistan, instead of a hair-trigger, knee-jerk response, which has become very normalized to the point that many have suggested that this is a false flag operation. Even if you don't do that, even if you walk away from that false flag assumption, because the Vice President of the United States was visiting the country, what you do see is a situation where one country is acting for the last several decades with restraint, has been seeking joint protocols on countering terrorism. You see Pakistan fighting terrorism. We fought it, in Afghanistan, on the borderlands of Afghanistan with the United States for many years. We got rid of Al-Qaeda. It was because of us that happened. And now you have a situation where India is hanging on to, it's like a cliche they keep repeating, they keep amplifying.
Just to clarify, Senator, you're saying that Lashkar-e-Taiba, as far as you're concerned, is a made-up name, a made-up entity?
So I'm not suggesting it's a made-up name or entity. I mean, you're a journalist, and I have been one too. I'm a politician. No one would suggest anything is a made-up entity, but its operational presence in this particular attack, its links to Pakistan, none of that is on the table. So if I'm going to respond to what India has said without any shred of evidence, identification, name, then I'm sorry, really, the ducks may be, the media ducks may be aligned in India's favor, but that's no longer the case. I think everybody's asking the right questions. What is the smoke and mirrors that is leading to such extreme acts of civilian and other attacks? I mean, those are premeditated attacks. You can't tomorrow say, oh, well, there's an old group I can think up of, and Kulbhushan Yadav was caught. It's not a Pakistani serving military officer caught in their country. See, they were spying, illegally caught here. We've had an explosion in Balochistan, a heinous explosion called the Jafar Express. A train exploded. The Indian fingerprints were all over that place because that's where the Indian serving officials were found. But we did not actually cross the line and suggest that this means that we will attack India or we will start beating them up. And we always suggest joint protocols. Let's look at this together. And if there's a trust deficit, which there is, obviously now on both sides, after years of such talk and lack of trust, then you have, we made a very logical offer of saying, well, you pick whom you want. Let's have a neutral investigation into this. Let's decide where the dotted line goes to, whose fingerprints are on this. I mean, it's a spectacular failure of their own.
Let me interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you, Senator, but what would be India's motive for carrying out attacks and operations inside Pakistan? What do you think India is seeking to achieve?
So India's been colonizing illegally occupied Kashmir and not being able to achieve the kind of objectives they thought they've been unable to colonize that area. And it's now the largest open prison in the world. The story is contained. You will not be allowed in. And what goes on there stays there pretty much. And it's a very violent place. Human rights fundamentals in India have plummeted. And the Modi regime has been regularly talking about weaponizing water as a higher riparian to hurt Pakistan, to move out of international treaties that govern such common resources. I mean, these are global commons, really. And there are international treaties that govern them, and Indus Waters Treaty has survived every war.
Sure, it survived since the 1968.
But Narendra Modi has been regularly talking about finding, ways to come out of it. And this is my assessment that the whole thing, this whole orchestrated campaign was it was a trigger to suggest that, well, now we are coming out of, we're going to hit you on the water, and this is where we stop, because they haven't been for 1 year sharing the data that is vital to managing water between the two countries, the flow of water at the right time. Everybody knows that Pakistan is, 90% of the Indus, of our livelihoods are around the Indus. So they've been very, very clear in trying to move away from a treaty that the World Bank mediated. And they've had several opportunities to discuss it with Pakistan, but for the last year, they've paralyzed all the protocols, such as the Permanent Indus Commission also, that would keep the water flowing in transparent data sharing and knowledge sharing platforms. They've disabled those already for the last 1 year. So we do see the motive quite clearly in doing so. They wanted to move out of the treaty, and this has given them a motive which we think is absolutely absurd.
All right, let's talk about where we go to from here. How do we end this cycle of violence? The United States seems to be criticizing Pakistan for jailing Imran Khan. That's something we're hearing from Washington. They say that the current prime minister is a dictator. I don't know how that's going to affect mediation efforts moving forwards. But the bottom line, it's going to take one side to say, right, we'll put a stop to the tit-for-tat cycle of retaliation. Will it be Pakistan?
I haven't heard the United States in any senior responsible position calling the Prime Minister of Pakistan a dictator. But having said that, I'm not going to get into who said what. The point really is, from since this crisis has blown up in everybody's faces, internationally as well, because these are two nuclear neighbors with a long history of conflict. And you have obviously the United States seeking to interrupt the escalatory cycle, but they have very clearly said both sides should exhibit restraint. Now, Pakistan, I don't see them finger pointing Pakistan. It used to be the norm, but that is no longer the case. Everybody seeks evidence for such a huge accusation, for an entire country to go to war with another, for an entire country to target innocent civilians in a premeditated act of war, which to me and in every international playbook is called international terrorism. Then I'm sorry, I see total equivalence on each side. Everybody is saying, well, it's also incumbent on India. Many countries are, of course, saying it's incumbent on India more, because frankly, India is the aggressor. And it is the aggressor that has to roll back its tools and instruments of belligerence and create strategic space for a cooling down of tensions. Pakistan has repeatedly said, we don't want to escalate. We want to work with maximum restraint, but you tested our conventional capability. Now you're testing our nation's patience by these kind of unprovoked, premeditated attacks.
Okay.
So I think India has to be actually India's friends who have made it the net security provider in the Asia-Pacific region. In fact, it's now called the Indo-Pacific. Everybody's a responsible player. The United States is, the People's Republic is, so many players involved. They can speak to India then that, look, you've been the aggressor here. Pakistan did not launch missile attacks into India. We did not, okay? So it is India which has been the aggressor very clearly. 75 to 80 jets in play is a huge attack that they attempted. You can verify this off your own record.
Sure.
And it is high time that, this bully in the backyard behavior stop. Pakistan's not going to let this be normalized. So yes, it is important that countries speaking to India invest in some protocols that allow India, well, they've had their face saving, to step back. Although I think downing 5 jets, which they took great pride on, was not face saving. But what they need to do now is look at interrupting the potential escalation here.
All right.
On the ladder and sort of climb it down. But India's got to climb it down. It's not going to happen unilaterally again and again from Pakistan. We have been suing for peace. We have been talking about dialogue as the path forward to everything. This is the 21st century. We're not invested in conflict or wars. Absolutely not.
All right.
And we have maximum restraint.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We're
going to have to leave it. We're going to have
that further if there were valid proposals on the table, I'm sure.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. It was, in fact, the US Congressman Ro Khanna who called the Pakistani army chief a dictator. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Senator Sherry Rehman. Really appreciate you speaking to us. Well, following on from these latest India-Pakistan tensions, India launched strikes in response to the deadly Kashmir attack, and Pakistan has retaliated soon thereafter. Well, global leaders, including the US President Donald Trump and the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, have expressed concerns, urging both sides to show restraint.
It's a shame we just heard about it, just as we were walking in the doors of the Oval. Just heard about it. I guess people knew something was going to happen based on a little bit of the past. They've been fighting for a long time. They've been fighting for many, many decades and centuries, actually, if you really think about it. No, I just hope it ends very quickly.
Rising tensions between India and Pakistan will be of serious concern for many across Britain. We are engaging urgently with both countries, as well as other international partners, encouraging dialogue, de-escalation, and the protection of civilians.
Well, let's get more now on the global reaction to the situation. We're joined by Fred Fleitz, former Chief of Staff of the US National Security Council under President Trump. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Fred, great to have you with us once again here on Al Arabiya News. We're talking here about some of the worst tensions, the most serious tensions between these two nuclear-armed neighbours in the course of the last few decades. Do you think we could be looking here at the beginnings of a full-scale war?
Well, we have to treat this conflict very seriously. Both nations probably have dozens of nuclear weapons. I don't know whether they have H-bombs, but we know they conducted nuclear tests in the 1990s that probably were intended to develop more advanced nuclear weapons. There's been restraint between the two countries because they are nuclear armed for a long time, but it is very dangerous when India fires missiles into Pakistan Pakistan reportedly has shot down Indian fighters. I think that there will be a de-escalation, but this is not the kind of conflict we want to see between two nuclear-armed states.
Yeah, and what would be the sort of the broader consequences? I mean, could there be consequences beyond the borders of India and Pakistan were this to develop into a fully fledged military confrontation?
Well, there could be a variety of consequences, especially because Pakistan gets its weapons from China and is a close ally of China. And if it looked like, and India is an enemy of China, and if it looked like that there was a conflict that Pakistan was going to lose or lose a substantial number of forces, China could get involved. There was a conflict in the Himalayan area between India and China. I think just last year, it wasn't as serious as this, but it still was a conflict between two opposing armies. So this could easily spin out of control.
So when China said earlier on today it's willing to play, quote, a constructive role in easing the tensions, I mean, would you take that offer and that suggestion with a degree of caution?
I don't think so. I think the U.S. is in a very good position to help mediate this dispute. The U.S. has a good relationship with both sides. I think the Pakistani and Indian government would be prepared to deal with President Trump or Secretary Rubio. And I'm sure Rubio already is working on this and has sent diplomats to the region.
But, I mean, we're being told, I mean, analysts are saying to us that India is obviously close to the United States, as you've been saying, but Pakistan has been getting progressively close to China, and therefore we could be looking at the beginnings of a sort of a tug of war between Washington and Beijing playing out in India and Pakistan. I mean, what do you make of that sort of commentary?
Well, Pakistan has always been close to China because of its rivalry with India. It is true that Pakistan buys relatively few arms from the United States now and is now being armed by China. But I think Pakistan still values its relationship with the United States. And I think that puts the U.S. in a good position to mediate this conflict.
Quite interestingly, the Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, is due in New Delhi today and says that Tehran wants to mediate. What chances do you think there are of Tehran managing to broker some sort of an arrangement between India and Pakistan?
I don't think either party would trust Iran as a neutral party here. I think the Iranians like making trouble. It's sort of typical of an Iranian official to make a statement like that. Iran has its own troubles with the Middle East and with the United States. I don't think either Pakistan or India will allow the Iranians to distract the world from Iran's problems by getting involved in this conflict.
Obviously, when you look at the history between the two countries, going all the way back to partition, 1947. I mean, and there have been conflicts over the years and flare-ups and two wars. I mean, do you feel like there's a bit of a sense of inevitability about us being in the situation we're in right now?
I don't think so, because they're both nuclear-armed powers. They're both very well armed otherwise with missiles and fighters. Both nations could do enormous, devastating destruction to the other. It's very different than when we had serious wars at the beginning of the formation of Pakistan, when it seceded from India. We have had skirmishes in the Kashmir area since then. I don't think this is going to escalate into a major war, but I don't think the world can take a chance.
And I mean, the fact that Pakistan's been in a degree of political turmoil and, Imran Khan remains a hugely popular figure, former prime minister, former cricketer, but remains in prison. Do you think, the preconditions were right for somehow that situation to be exploited by parties that wanted to cause trouble and generate friction between India and Pakistan?
I don't know. I know that the Kashmir area has always been a tinderbox. Pakistan is upset that there has been no resolution to the border issue and who controls what and the displacement of people, the nationality issue of Kashmiris in India. There are a lot of outstanding questions that are nowhere close to being resolved. They have caused incredible passions on both sides. So it doesn't take much to spark some kind of conflict.
Sure, obviously Pakistan is home to a number of these militant organizations which India says carried out the attack in Kashmir in late April that resulted in the deaths of 24 civilians. I mean, that's probably, isn't it, a concern that Washington would also share? I mean, how do you think Washington views India's demand that Pakistan does more to crack down on these kinds of groups?
It's a real concern that periodically there's acts of terrorism by terrorist groups that have some kind of presence in Pakistan, and the Pakistani government claims it has nothing to do with these organizations. That's what happened with this recent attack that killed Indian tourists that were in a Pakistan area of Kashmir. It is a frustrating matter, and it isn't just for India. It's also a matter that concerns the United States and other nations.
I mean, when it's you know, we've spoken to people on this channel who've said it's all very well for India to point the finger of blame at Pakistan and say they're not doing enough or they're actually funding some of these militant organizations. But I mean, there needs to be some evidence. I mean, couldn't the United States press India to provide evidence, and then perhaps everyone would be better placed to tackle those militant groups?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer questions like that. I'm simply going to say that the U.S. should be an honest broker to work with both governments to de-escalate and stop this conflict.
And we've heard from Marco Rubio saying, you know, we want to keep lines of communication open, avoid escalation. I mean, what would you like to see the State Department doing specifically?
Well, I'd like to see trusted envoys of Rubio in the region right now talking to both governments. And I think that's already happened. We haven't heard about it, but that's what a competent Secretary of State does. I know Rubio is on this, and I think that we will use our influence with both nations to press them to stop this conflict. There are so many other major conflicts going on in the world right now. We don't need this one. It's unnecessary, and I don't think either nation wants to escalate.
Yeah, I mean, obviously President Trump doesn't want to see any new conflicts, you know, beginning on his watch, and he's got two old ones that he's focusing a lot of efforts on as it is. I mean, clearly Washington has zero appetite and absolutely wants to extinguish this as quickly as possible. I mean, is that roughly where you think the Trump administration sits on this one?
I think President Trump doesn't want this to get out of hand because these are two nuclear-armed states with sizable missile and aircraft arsenals, and it could easily get out of hand. So it's necessary to weigh in aggressively right now with good diplomacy.
There's one US congressman by the name of Ro Khanna who's called the Pakistani military chief, Asim Munir, a dictator. Is that a view you think is widely shared in Washington, or is that just one individual?
I think that's really unhelpful by a member of Congress when the U.S. has an opportunity to mediate as an honest broker between both sides. It's the kind of irresponsible statement by a member of Congress that's all too typical, but I hope we won't hear more of that.
Okay, and just sort of looking forwards, how do you rate the chances of us bringing about a peaceful reconciliation to this, and perhaps bringing about something a bit longer lasting so that the tensions that we were talking about that date all the way back to the 1940s can perhaps have a line drawn under them?
I think it looks promising right now that both parties want to de-escalate, but you do make an interesting point here. There should be an effort to get some kind of long-term solution, some type of diplomatic effort to resolve the issues that are dividing both nations in the Kashmir area, where there's no border. There's a line of control, and there's really surging tensions on both sides. So that would be the way to deal with this, not simply to end this current conflict, but to come up with a diplomatic process for a long-term solution.
And your thoughts about water being such an important lever that India has at its disposal? 6 rivers that flow down from the Himalayas, 3 of which are flowing into Pakistan, 3 into India. I mean, the Pakistanis are already saying that India is using water and in breach of an accord going back to the 1960s, using water as a weapon of war. What do you think the US position is on that?
I don't know. I don't have a position on that issue.
Okay. All right, we're going to leave it there. We're out of time. But thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you speaking to us. Fred Fleitz, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Good to be here.
That is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.